The film is set in dystopian France, where the economic situation has devolved into a nightmare, with barely 20% of population working and having access to resources. As a result, the surviving populace begins rioting, but relief never comes. Instead, the government expels. They may continue endlessly. It's been 30 years since the event. The jobless now reside in the zone, while the employed dwell in the rich section of town. The two groups of humanity are separated by a massive wall surrounded by unbreakable security. People in the zone suffer from illnesses, starvation, and lack access to good drinking water, whilst those on the other side of the wall enjoy access to all of the world's resources. In the opening scene, we meet Ruben Garcia, a guy who lives in the town with his family. Ruben and Thais work as technicians in various areas of Aquaville, the town's only water business. Meanwhile, his cunning and self-centered father, Silas Garcia, is a prominent executive in the same corporation. Aquaville provides water to the zone on a monthly or bi-monthly basis. This is clearly insufficient to satisfy the desire, therefore the zoners often turn to narcotics to quench their thirst. One day, all of the people of the zone assemble at the wall, where France's Prime Minister, Nadia Passeron, is scheduled to come for a historic visit. The PM's convoy reaches the zone as the whole town is riveted to their screens. It is then revealed that a gang of activists from the zone abducted PM Nadia's husband, Moretti, who is also the labor minister, 13 months earlier in protest of the wall. And, after months of wrangling, the two sides have finally struck an agreement to release the minister. PM Nadia said in her address that she hopes one day individuals from various socioeconomic strata may coexist peacefully. She then declares that as a first step toward that aim, the activists will free Moretti in return for 10,000 jobless zoners being given work in the area via the Solidarity Job Program. Everyone within and outside the wall is taken aback by the statement. While the zoners are overjoyed, the local inhabitants are concerned since they haven't seen or interacted with jobless people in over 30 years. Furthermore, due to malicious propaganda, the majority of the people in town have bad attitudes against them. Minister Moretti is soon liberated and goes home with his wife. It is subsequently revealed that Prime Minister Nadia despises the zoners just as much as the ordinary townie, and she only consented to the arrangement because her husband's abduction provoked worldwide outrage. The World Bank also threatened her administration with fines if she continued to reject the zoners' requests. Meanwhile, at the wall, the zoners chosen at random for the program are summoned for an interview. Izia, a single mother, and her buddy Larkham are among them. People that are engaged in narcotics, trafficking, or gambling are quickly dismissed during the interview. Simultaneously, Izia's lone kid, Noah, is at school, where his teacher, Robinson, is critiquing the existing French system. He emphasizes that one should not have to work in order to survive in society with dignity. Noah disagrees, claiming that labor is freeing. He provides the example of his father, who won a lottery 13 years ago and utilized the proceeds to relocate to South Europe, where he now lives contentedly. The film then turns to Aquaville, where Ruben discovers that his department head has died from overwork. Instead of being depressed, Ruben is overjoyed since he has been waiting to take over his boss's job. Without further ado, he texts his well-connected father, Silas. Moretti receives medical care in the Prime Minister's mansion, and it is revealed that he was tortured for information. Later, PM Nadia's security chief, Colonel Jean, meets Moretti, who assures her that he has not revealed any state secrets to the extremists. As a consequence, Nadia considers Moretti fit for work and reappoints him as Minister of Labor. We hear in Aquaville that Ruben's wife, Thais, is having an affair with one of her co-workers, Hans. The two are really plotting to steal vital business data from Aquaville, which they want to sell for money and use to go overseas and begin a new life. However, their efforts have so far failed since Thais hasn't been able to go anywhere near her father and workplace, lost Silas. To make things worse, the authorities have begun to accuse Hans of unlawful activity, and he is being probed. Later, Ruben informs Thais of his desire to seek for the post of his late employer. He is anxious for the promotion so that he may send his autistic daughter, Mile, to Phoenix Academy, a well-known school for children with special needs. This is because if Mile continues to attend regular schools, she will be unable to find work and will consequently end herself in the zone. The egotistical Thais, on the other hand, is convinced that Ruben's selfish father would not assist him in obtaining the promotion. She also says they should have gotten rid of Mile long ago. Unfortunately, the young girl overhears the talk and gets upset, so Ruben approaches her to console her. The following day, Ruben approaches his father, Silas, anxiously, and asks for his aid in securing the managerial post. Surprisingly, the latter accepts and invites Ruben to an exclusive ministerial party the next day. Meanwhile, Hans meets with PM Nadia's head of security, Jean Mars, in the Aquaville. It turns out that both of them are hidden zone supporters working with activists to gather dirt on Aquaville, the Aquaville government's largest financial backer. Thais plans to take information from Silas' office the next day and leave to the zone the following day. Elsewhere, Izzy and her buddy Larkham pass their interviews and are overjoyed since they are finally obtaining jobs. Hundreds of zoners are taken to town the next day for their first day of work. Izzy is sent to work at Ruben's home, and the latter is taken aback when he realizes she looks just like his wife. Meanwhile, PM Nadia and her crew handpick Larkham and force him to publicly laud the Solidarity program. Thais is captured and questioned by Aquaville security in the following scenario. Her sole transgression is that she regularly associates with Hans, a suspected zone collaborator. Ruben, who is running late for the party, attempts unsuccessfully to call her. As a result, with no other alternatives, he persuades Izzy to join him to the celebration as his wife. Later, the two arrive at the location and are somewhat apprehensive in the presence of all the dignitaries. However, with the assistance of his father, Ruben and his alleged wife dazzle the CEO of Aquaville. Meanwhile, after being released, Thais rushes directly to Jean and informs her that she was unable to finish the task. Upset, Jean smuggles Thais into the zone, where she is picked up by an activist called Boris. Hans is revealed the same day, therefore he is also transported to the zone. Ruben begs Izzy to play his wife's part the following day when Thais remains uncontactable. Izzy is terrified of being caught, but Ruben promises her a large sum of money, so she grudgingly accepts. He uses this to teach Izzy Thais her job and finally puts her to work. Later in the day, it was reported in the press that 22 Solidarity workers were assaulted by local people on the first day. This disturbs PM Nadia because she has to convince the world that reconciliation is taking place. As a result, she hires Larkham as a special advisor to Minister Moretti in order for him to assist in the success of the Solidarity initiative. Larkham is happy about his new post because he really wants the two groups of people to get along, whereas Moretti despises the unemployed due to the suffering he received during his confinement. He strangles Larkham and tells him to stay away. Ruben, on the other hand, travels to formally submit his name in the contest to become the director of water quality, while Izzy struggles to adjust to her new work. Meanwhile, Noah discovers a 13-year-old magazine with a cover article about a lottery winner from that year. Noah is taken aback when he discovers that Izzy lied to him about his father winning the lotto. Hurt, he goes about and encounters Valley, a local robber. Valley invites him to her apartment, where they have drugs, and the two soon connect. In other news, Thais discovers that Hans duped her and is a zone's collaborator. She is angry and threatens to report him. The police narrow down 3 female workers Hans had contact with while examining his espionage operations. Izzy, nicknamed Thais Garcia, is one of the ladies. The ladies are brought before head of security Jean Mars by the police. Jean is surprised to find someone impersonating Thais Garcia since she personally delivered the genuine one to the zone. Later, she follows Thais home and discovers that it is Izzy disguised as Thais Garcia. Jean communicates the information to the already mentioned activist, Boris, and urges him to contact Izzy in the hopes of using her to steal data from Aquaville. When Izzy arrives to the zone, she discovers that Noah has gone missing and begins searching for him everywhere. Boris, on the other hand, approaches her. And lo and behold, he shows himself to be Noah's estranged father, Ethan. Ethan abandoned his family and changed his identity to Boris as a result of his engagement in anti-system groups. Izzy had to lie to her kid in order to protect his emotions. Ethan requests her assistance, but Izzy is not delighted to see him and rejects to assist. Elsewhere, Noah almost overdoses on drugs, so a terrified valet lets him off at the house of the local teacher, Robinson. The latter quickly telephones Izzy, and the two manage to resuscitate the adolescent. After Noah has gone to bed, Izzy tells Robinson that she is leaving her job and taking her son south with whatever money she has accumulated. When she arrives home, she discovers that Ethan and his guys have broken into her room and stolen her money. As a result, forced to work with the activists, Izzy accepts a chip to implant into Silas' computer. Moretti suffers from PTSD on a regular basis, but he keeps his difficulties hidden from PM Nadia. He gradually develops a disdain towards the jobless, and to make things worse, Nadia accidentally confides in him that a Solidarity worker murdered his boss the previous day, and that she blocked the media from exposing it in order to keep public order. Meanwhile, Hans discovers that Thais hasn't drunk water in 2 days since Ethan has refused to provide her with clean drinking water. Disgusted and outraged, he approaches Ethan, who refuses to budge. Unable to bear the sight of her in this situation, Hans unwillingly murders her and puts her out of her suffering. The next day, Ruben attends a tough interview in which he is tasked with terminating his old coworker. Meanwhile, Izzy improves at Thais' job and visits Silas' office during her lunch break. However, on her way there, she runs into Aquaville's CEO Bartholomew. The nasty guy invites her to his office and then exploits her in return for promoting Ruben. Later, a number of Solidarity workers flee their houses and congregate at a football field. The local people are concerned because they are severe workaholics who do not grasp the notion of relaxation. Fearing another squabble, PM Nadia sent Larkham and Minister Moretti to meet with the employees. Due to his PTSD, the latter flees, but Larkham is able to return the employees to their employers. Noah, on the other hand, hangs out with Valley again, and the two sneak into town through a hidden tunnel. They are quickly apprehended by the police, and Noah wanders farther into town while Valley rushes back to the zone. Fearing for his life, Noah travels to Ruben's house, where his mother had gave him instructions. Ruben and Izzy get home after work, and the latter tells how the CEO took advantage of her. Surprisingly, Ruben seems unfazed, since it is typical in town for women to give up their dignity for their husbands. This irritates Izzy, who accuses him of being just concerned with his advancement. When they get home, they are astounded to see Noah inside. The community has also been placed on high alert as a result of the incursion at this time. Because Izzy is concerned about her son's safety, Ruben offers to drive him to the wall. He apologizes to Izzy for everything and confesses that he really wants the promotion so that he may send his daughter to Phoenix Academy. When the mother-son team returns home, Noah accuses Izzy of selling out at work. She smacks him, perplexed and outraged, and wants to know why he's been behaving out recently. Noah ultimately confronts her about the deception, and she explains how Ethan abandoned them due to his activism. Moretti comes on TV the following day, going on a furious diatribe about jobless people and warning of an impending invasion, much to Nadia's chagrin. Despite this, she refuses to abandon her husband and keeps a close eye on him at all times. She then consults her father, Mr. Passeron, who turns out to be a former French prime minister. During his leadership, the wall was really erected. Nadia expresses her dissatisfaction with the wall, but her father insists that it was the only option. Later, she requests that Larkham submit video evidence of how the program has altered his life. Nadia intends to disseminate the footage before to the arrival of the World Bank president. At Aquaville, Ruben's rival for the management post discovers Izzy's reality and begins blackmailing Ruben. The latter asks that she keep her mouth quiet, but she refuses. So, having no other option, Ruben murders her. He then phones his father, and the two dispose of the corpse together. That evening, Ruben tells Izzy everything and sobs as he realizes what a monster he has become. Izzy feels sorry for him and attempts to console him. They end up making love because one thing leads to another. Sol, the protesters' leader, eventually arrives and appears in the zone. In an unexpected turn of events, he is revealed to be Noah's instructor, Robinson. He and his rebels want to conquer the town, but in order to do so, they need Izzy to take the data from Aquaville. The next day, the head of the World Bank pays a visit, and PM Nadia presents him to Larkham. Later, she meets privately with the president and demands that the money be released since they are desperately needed. However, the president informs her that the world community is wary of backing her administration since Moretti, who incited violence against the jobless, remains in her cabinet. As a consequence, PM Nadia makes the difficult decision to remove her husband, Moretti, from the government. She also rejects any of his disparaging remarks about the jobless. The World Bank president is ultimately pleased, and the monies are released to Nadia's government. Moretti is extremely offended, and he later confesses to Nadia that the insurgents coerced him to expose state secrets. Aquaville, it turns out, is purposefully poisoning Zone's water with the government's consent for profit and power. Nadia panics, but she soon devises a solution. Ruben returns to Aquaville for his last interview before being chosen for the managing role. He begins by stating his abilities, but then veers entirely off topic, framing his last competition for Peterson's murder. He also produces fabricated proof doctored by Silas to support his accusation, resulting in the competitor's disqualification. Meanwhile, Noah and Vala show up to the activists' hidden hideaway and want to see Ethan. As predicted, no one has heard of that name before, and the teens are asked to leave. Noah and Vala comply, but on their way out, they elude the guard and get into the building. They then listen in on the activists' talk, and Noah discovers that his instructor Robinson is the group's leader. In the next scene, Izzy returns to Aquaville for work and eventually gains access to Silas' office. She successfully removes the data from her chip, but before she can escape, Silas comes and catches her red-handed. He assaults her, but she manages to escape with the chip. Silas doesn't waste any time in informing his son about Izzy's betrayal, and Ruben apprehends her before she flees the premises. He smacks her, and she drops the chip in the process. Izzy then admits that she was compelled to participate by the protesters. Silas later tells his son to murder Izzy, but Ruben resists and chooses to let her go. He even drives her to the wall for all she has done for him and his children. But before Izzy can pass inside the zone, she is apprehended by Silas' troops. She is questioned, and Silas discovers that she was intended to take data from his computer and provide it to someone. Silas is angry by the news, but he also sees it as an excellent chance to apprehend the activists. He sends Izzy as bait to her meeting location, and when Nadia's head of security Gene arrives, his men kidnap her. Meanwhile, Larkham is offered the opportunity to permanently relocate to the town. He enthusiastically invites his wife to accompany her, but she declines. This sparks an altercation, and Larkham resolves to relocate to the town on his own. He arrives at his new residence a few hours later and is told to meet Moretti. Surprisingly, he discovers the former minister dead in the pool. As Larkham tries to make sense of the situation, Zoe, the prime minister's daughter, comes and shoots him. Nadia later discovers the pamphlets and decides to carry out the last part of her plan. She arrives in front of the press to reveal the murder of her husband, Monroe Moretti. She blames Larkham for the crime and claims he was shot dead while fleeing. Nadia then embarks on a diatribe against the zoners, alleging that their hate towards the employed has reached hazardous proportions. She announces the suspension of the Solidarity Work program in this manner. She also launches a massive raid on the zone in order to apprehend the activists. Throughout this, Silas informs Aquaville's CEO, Bartholomew, of the sad happenings. Gene is tortured and burned on his instructions before being imprisoned alongside Izzy. Silas and Bartholomew then meet with Nadia and tell that her security chief, Gene Mars, is really working with the rebels. Later, thankful to Silas for averting a big controversy, Bartholomew promotes his son Ruben and enrolls his daughter Mile at the Phoenix School. Meanwhile, Sol and the rebels discover that Izzy and Gene have been arrested. Concerned about their safety, Hans insists on rescuing the two, but Sol resists, claiming that rescuing them will damage the activist network. Noah and Valley overhear the chat and are shocked to realize that the rebels are just as wicked as the ones they are fighting against. Noah then swears to save his mother. In the next scene, Silas notifies Ruben of his promotion, and the latter rushes to Aquaville to take his new post. He does, however, discover the chip that Izzy had lost earlier. He plays the chip and is shocked to find the overwhelming evidence of Aquaville polluting the drinking water for profit and control. Ruben, disgusted, plans to anonymously submit the material online and defect from the town for good. He then grabs his daughter and dashes to the wall in search of Izzy. The shocking news goes viral, and Sol and the activists exult. Silas, on the other hand, directs his IT staff to track down the individual who leaked the information. PM Nadia also panics and rushes before the media. She considers the whole disclosure a slander effort and threatens anyone guilty with severe consequences. In other news, Ruben and Mile cross the zone through the hidden entrance, where they come into Noah and Vala prepared to invade the town. The two have a brief conversation, and when Ruben discovers that Izzy has been detained, he begs Noah to look after Mile while he rushes to free Izzy. After a time, the rebels eventually launch an onslaught from various directions, and Nadia's defenses are swiftly overrun. This is due to the fact that many local inhabitants have begun to oppose her, and many have already quit their jobs. Hans and the others also arrive in town to complete the job. However, Ethan leaves them and goes in search of Izzy. Ruben also arrives in Aquaville in search of Izzy, and Silas understands that his own son is responsible for the leak. When the two meet, a furious Ruben kidnaps his father and threatens him with revealing Izzy's whereabouts. Unfortunately, the police learn that he is the source of the data leak and arrest him at the same moment. Ruben and Izzy are then imprisoned. Nonetheless, he is relieved to be reunited with her. Meanwhile, the conflict escalates. The walls fall, and thousands of zoners pour into town. Nadia, Zoe, and Bartholomew begin to scent defeat, which concerns them. Zoe sobs at the PM's mansion and blames her mother for everything. Before storming away, she swears to join up with the rebels and testify against her. Prison guards, on the other hand, are instructed to shoot all detainees. As one of them shoots Ruben, Ethan appears out of nowhere and neutralizes the guard. He and his troops then rescue Izzy and a wounded Ruben. Simultaneously, Sol arrives at the PM's mansion and seems to execute her behind closed doors. Just then, Zoe appears and offers to assist him in running the nation. 3 days have passed. Ruben is recovering in the hospital, and Izzy is reunited with Noah. After seeing his father, Ethan, the latter learns that after so many years away, he is now just another stranger. Izia then informs Ruben that she wishes to choose the third choice and marry him, much to Ruben's delight. Noah accepts the choice and invites Vala to live with him and his family, but Vala gently rejects and part ways with him. Sol eventually proclaims the end of the discriminating political system and the start of a new, equal, and better existence during a news conference. Later, he interacts with former Prime Minister Mr. Passeron, and it is revealed that Sol is his son and Nadia's brother. He had evicted Sol due to his lack of political zeal. Mr. Passeron is berating his son in the closing scene when Nadia comes, and it turns out she has also joined forces with Sol, much to the old man's surprise.